The decolonization of East Asia was a historic period marked by the end of colonial rule and the emergence of independent nations in the region. It was a time of great change and struggle as East Asian countries fought for their freedom and sovereignty. The process of decolonization in East Asia began after World War II when Japan, which had occupied many countries in the region, was defeated. The war had devastated the region, leaving it in ruins and creating a power vacuum that needed to be filled. This provided an opportunity for the people of East Asia to assert their independence and challenge the colonial powers. One of the key events in the decolonization of East Asia was the Japanese surrender in 1945. With Japan's defeat, the countries it had occupied were now free to determine their own future. However, this did not mean an immediate end to colonial rule. Many countries in the region still had to struggle against their former colonial powers to secure their independence. In countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines, nationalist movements had already been formed and were fighting for independence from their colonial rulers. These movements gained momentum after World War II, as the former colonies seized the opportunity to demand their freedom. They organized protests, strikes, and even armed resistance to challenge colonial rule. The process of decolonization in East Asia was not without its challenges. The former colonial powers were hesitant to give up control and fought back against the nationalist movements. They used both military and political means to maintain their dominance in the region. However, the determination of the people in East Asia could not be stifled, and their fight for independence continued. One of the most well-known examples of decolonization in East Asia is the struggle for independence in Vietnam. The Vietnamese people, led by Ho Chi Minh and the Viet Minh, fought a long and brutal war against the French colonial forces. Despite being heavily outnumbered and outgunned, the Vietnamese managed to secure their independence in 1954 after the defeat of the French at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. In Indonesia, the struggle for independence was also fierce. The Indonesian people, led by figures like Sukarno and Muhammad Hatta, fought against the Dutch colonial forces. After years of resistance and negotiations, Indonesia finally declared its independence in 1945. However, it was not until 1949 that the Dutch officially recognized Indonesia as a sovereign nation. Other countries in East Asia also went through similar struggles for independence. The Philippines, for example, fought against American colonial rule and finally gained its independence in 1946. Malaysia and Singapore also achieved independence from British colonial rule in the 1950s and 1960s. The decolonization of East Asia had a profound impact on the region and the world. It marked the end of an era of colonial domination and the beginning of a new era of self-determination. The newly independent countries faced many challenges in rebuilding their economies, establishing governments, and forging their own identities. However, they were able to overcome these difficulties and emerge as important players on the global stage. The decolonization of East Asia also had significant political and ideological consequences. It inspired other anti-colonial movements around the world and fueled the momentum for decolonization in other regions. It also created a sense of nationalism and unity among the newly independent countries in East Asia, as they shared a common history of struggle against colonial rule. In conclusion, the decolonization of East Asia was a transformative period in the history of the region. It marked the end of colonial rule and the emergence of independent nations. The process was not without its challenges, but the determination and resilience of the people in East Asia prevailed. The decolonization of East Asia not only shaped the region itself but also had a lasting impact on the course of history globally.